Yeah, gotta aim for the top like, hold up. Yeah, I can never doubt myself, I know better. All of you critics be acting like you know better. Blowing the smoke, but I know when the dust settles that I'm in my element. It's evident that there's levels to the game.
So what's happening, people? Welcome back to the Athletes to Athletes podcast. Today, sitting down with Gwen. And Gwen, it's been a long time since we talked the first time. It was awesome to meet you then, and glad that we finally had a chance after the holiday craziness to get on here and chat. So welcome to the show. I'm glad that you had some time to get on here with me.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's start right off the bat and talk about growing up being an athlete. What was the inspiration that made you want to jump into athletics and not something else?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to grow up in a pretty athletic-centered place. So I grew up in Oregon, and only about 45 minutes away from Tracktown, USA, which is Eugene, Oregon. And I feel like the culture there was just everyone was active and outdoors. And for me, it was a way to meet people and make community, as well as fueling my competitive side. I think from a pretty young age, I was very competitive, whether it was playing games with my family or, PE class, racing all the boys and trying to be faster than them. I knew I had a competitive side to me. So I chose sports because it gave me that community. It gave me an outlet to be competitive and to meet a lot of different people. Yeah.
Who were some of your inspirations or people that you looked up to as a young athlete that made you even more competitive?
Yeah, I think, again, being so close to the track influence, I followed track very closely. I remember the first time that I went to Hayward Field in Eugene to watch the 2012 Olympic trials there, and was just so inspired by all the athletes and thought, hey, maybe, one day that could be me, which I know we'll talk about a little further of just my journey, not necessarily being an athlete at the Olympics, but being involved in the Olympics. So I think that really inspired me. I remember watching specifically Galen Rupp. He's, an amazing athlete, long distance runner. Watching him on the track, I've always been inspired by Allison Felix as well, another one of my track idols. So I think those athletes, just seeing their determination and really just doing what they love, inspired me to continue as well.
Mm-hmm. And as a young athlete, right, it's always just fun and games. Obviously you have the competitive fire and you want to win, and you even said it, you want to prove that you're faster than the boys. But then as you get older, it really becomes more of a focus and you start to kind of hone in on that. How old were you when you would say that you realized that being a athlete on the next level was something that you wanted to do and it really came into focus?
Yeah, great question. I love this question because it really proves that it's never too late to have those dreams to, race competitively. But I think I did track more for fun all through middle school and early high school. It wasn't until my sophomore year of track that I realized that I could actually do it beyond high school. And at that point, that's really when I was like, hey, maybe this is something I can try. And I just put out this crazy dream of what if I could run at a D1 college? That would be amazing. My sophomore year of high school. And from that point on, I really just focused in and started, doing daily doubles, watching my diet, making sure that I was picking up all the healthy habits to be an athlete. And by my junior year was really starting that recruiting process.
So, you said you really started to pick things up doing, daily doubles, which as an athlete, you love and you hate.
Yeah.
It's always fun, but you're like, man, I got to go back and train. I got to go back and do more. But you're also trying to balance being a kid too.
Yeah.
You still have that student part, that athlete part, and then just the life of just being a normal person. What kind of sacrifices did you start to make when you realized that being competitive on that next level was something that you needed to do? And how else did you also focus on the academic part?
Yeah, I think, as far as picking up healthy habits, just realizing that, my body, I couldn't fuel it with junk food. I had to fuel it with only the best type of fuel. I, think about cars as an analogy. You're not putting crappy gasoline into a really, really nice race car. So that's kind of how I treated my body. And obviously that does take sacrifice when you're young, 16, 17 years old and out with your friends and everyone wants pizza or Taco Bell. Just trying to be a little bit more mindful in my nutrition choices. But, also as well, trying to just enjoy the time being a high schooler and being, a kid, as you said. I think I found that through just always having fun, no matter what, even if it was a bad race day or a bad practice, just trying to find the joy in it and remember how fortunate I am to have a body that allows me to do what I can. So I think just always trying to find the glass half full perspective of things, no matter what I was faced with.
So you talked a little bit about how you honed in around your junior year, and that's when the recruiting kind of started. Yeah. What was that process like for you?
Yeah, I would say for me, I definitely had big dreams, and my performance was aligning with hoping to go in that direction, but wasn't quite all the way there. So I was a huge advocate for myself. This is, as I have connected with younger athletes now, post-college, it's my biggest piece of advice is advocate for yourself and make sure that you're getting yourself out there. I started with just cold emailing probably around 30 coaches my junior year. I was getting some D3 and D2 contacts from coaches, but again, I set this, at the time, it seemed like a crazy goal to run D1. So I was really focused on those D1 universities. So I, sat down and wrote a letter of basically just selling myself and selling my passion and determination and work ethic. And I didn't quite have the times on the track that supported a D1 athlete, but I had the heart and passion for it. So I really just cast my net super wide and hoped that I'd get a couple bites.
And what happened when you start to advocate for yourself?
Good things. I heard back from a couple coaches and was able to go on a few recruiting trips to a couple different universities, and eventually did find a college program that, wanted to take me. So it was all great. Once I started advocating for myself, only good things happened.
How did you kind of sift through all of that, right? You said you really cast a wide net and you wanted to see who was interested in you, but obviously you also have to make sure that the school checks all the boxes for you. So how did you sift through everything in that process?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think I really stayed grounded in what made the most sense for me personally, as well as my family at the time. I had recognized that a lot of the programs I would be walking on. So financially, that's obviously a big investment if it's out of state or at a private school, which were some of the options that I had. So I stayed grounded and, kind of being at a school that I academically wasn't sure what direction I wanted to go. I mean, I had a rough idea, but really was focused again on the athletics piece. So I wanted a program, a school that had enough programs that I could kind of choose from. But then as well, again, that made sense financially for my family.
So you eventually end up at Oregon State.
Mhm.
So you didn't really go out of
Yep.
state. You stayed basically in track
Yep.
town, right? So what was that feeling like? You said you grew up, you were able to see 2012 Olympic trials. You were able to see a lot of these high level athletes, and it's a place you grew up
Yep.
in, and you end up being able to wear the colors of the school that you've been right around your entire life. What was that feeling like for you?
Yeah, I think as 17-year-old Gwen, it wasn't necessarily the path that I thought that was right for me. I think every teenager who grows up in a college town probably just wants to get out of that town. But once the first time that I did put on the Oregon State jersey with, the Beaver logo and the orange and black, I felt extreme pride in representing not only the school, but the town that really built me and the town that I was able to grow and flourish in. I think it's a really unique opportunity to be able to have so many connections in one town and also be in a college town that just supports all of their athletes. Corvallis is very much, everyone there is a Beaver fan, is reading the sports news. So to have elementary school teachers reach out to me and find my contact info and say, I'm so proud of you for making it, for, pursuing your dream. That was just a feeling that I really can't explain. So the path, again, I didn't think that was the path I was going to go on, but it ended up being the perfect path for me.
So you said, going in, you were unsure of what you were going to do academically, and you wanted a school that had, the same way that you kind of cast a wide net, the school had a wide net, so that you could really kind of figure out who you were. As a 17-year-old, you don't really know who you are. I want to go to college, and, the places check these boxes, and this seems like the right place for me, but you're still really, truly figuring out who am I as a person when you're 17 and 18.
Yep.
How did you figure out what avenue you wanted to go down academically?
Yeah, I would say academically, my first year of college, I was just, again, taking a wide variety of classes, seeing what I like, seeing what I didn't like. And I was really interested in the communication space and just how how different things get communicated to people, whether it's through verbal communication or nonverbal communication. You obviously in the sports world can see that through advertising, marketing, social media, things like that. So I started becoming interested in that world and actually had the opportunity to do an internship in our athletic social media department. And it was a wonderful opportunity to see all the work that goes into, running social media for a Pac-12 Division I school. So that was kind of when I decided, because for a little while I was an undecided major, and then I went into communications, just seeing kind of all that went into behind the scenes of an athletic department.
Mm-hmm. So once you're honing in on things on the track and you're honing in on things academically, what was that transition like for you though as a college student? Because obviously in high school things aren't as hectic, right? High school is high school. Call it what it is. College, it's a different beast. There's you do have coaches and teammates there that you can rely on, but ultimately it's down to you and the work that you put in. So what was that transition like for you?
Yeah, that was quite the transition. I will say, alongside being both a student and an athlete, I was also working a part-time job, being a walk-on athlete, trying to make a little extra money on the side. So that was difficult, but I think really taught me how to compartmentalize different aspects of my life. When I step on the track, I've got to be 100% an athlete. I've got to be mentally, physically, spiritually there on the track. When I sit down at night to do homework, I have to make sure that my brain space is in school, as well as when I was, working, just trying not to have, all the different things kind of be in my brain at once and not able to focus on one thing. So that's a skill that definitely at first is challenging to develop, but I will say moving into the professional world is a very valuable skill and something that will get you very far.
So yeah, let's talk a little bit about moving into the professional world. You obviously have been able to be around some of the biggest brands in the world at this point. But back when you were a college student, you're still planning. It's still about, your career and everything else. How do you put together that career plan to get to where you need to be and ultimately get into the role that you're in now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it followed a similar trajectory as my athletic career of just dreaming big. Why not dream big for the biggest brands and organizations and see if you can achieve that? But as far as thinking about that transition, I think there's no perfect way to plan for that transition. No matter how hard you feel like you prepare for the transition from being an athlete to being a professional, you'll never know what it's like until you go through it. But for me, it was really staying grounded in what my passion was and what I felt a lot of purpose in. I knew that I wanted to stay in sports because sport brings me a lot of purpose and a lot of passion. I truly believe it's the one thing in our world that can bring people together no matter what your background is. So I knew that that's what I loved so much about sport. And, I think at that point, coming out of college, I knew that I wasn't going to land the perfect position and the perfect, salary the very first job. But I knew just like I had, with my sport, I was going to have to work my butt off. I was going to have to move through all the steps to, finally get where I was hoping to go.
So what was that first step out of college and where did you end
my
up?
first step out of college is I worked part-time for the academic department for student athletes at Oregon State. So it was a temporary part-time position working in college athletics, which was in sports. So something that I was interested in, working with athletes, something, that was passionate to me. And, picking up a couple other side or part-time jobs on the side to make ends meet. And really just getting my feet wet in the college sports world and seeing where I wanted to go from there.
So, since then you've had stints at Nike and a couple other places, and now, you're not so much in the Olympics the way probably that you dreamed of as a youngster, but you still have an impact on the Olympics. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So after that temporary position was over, I decided to see what else was out there. And I landed a role at Nike at the headquarters in Portland, Oregon. And once again, just loved, working in sport, working for a brand that I believed in, that I aligned with my values and my mission. And after a little over a year there, ended up at the Olympic and Paralympic Committee out in Colorado. So once again, I think that transition and that experience was just, really looking for something that was out there at, how you think, how could I, go anywhere bigger than Nike or, these experience that I had. And I just saw this job posting at the Olympic and Paralympic Committee. It sounded super interesting. Made sure that the mission of the company and values of the organization aligned with mine and said, you know what? Why not? Why not just submit an application? I've been told a lot that connections, help you get jobs, and I believe that's true. But in this case, I did not have any connections there. I applied and, found a couple people there who believed in me and who wanted me on their team. and got the role there. So again, like you mentioned, it truly was a full circle moment of, looking back and thinking about the first time that I attended Olympic trials, or even watching the Olympics on the TV growing up, and imagining myself there competing. I think, our dreams and goals can evolve as our lives do as well. And my body was just not meant to be there as an athlete, but it was meant to be there to support our athletes. So being able to kind of see that full circle moment was amazing, and definitely one of the highlights of my life.
Mm-hmm. So now you work in strategy, correct? You're with strategy. What does that entail, and what does a day-to-day sort of look like for you?
I work on our business innovation team at the USOPC, and my role specifically is identifying different trends and topics in the sport industry that are going to potentially change and evolve sports. It's making sure that we're on the cutting edge of different technologies, and making sure that we're not getting left behind as the world changes around us. And so that role's incredibly fulfilling. I would say being able to have an influence on the future of sport of America, and of, this great country that sends amazing athletes to Olympic and Paralympic games, is extremely satisfying.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of fun. I've had a chance to work with, USATF, and as well as, USA Wrestling, and, being able to work with these organizations is incredible. You are literally stretching beyond that, right? You're working with every single one of these governing bodies. What's that like to balance all of these different governing bodies and make sure that, you're strategizing for the betterment of the sport?
Yeah, I think just keeping in mind the full picture is always very important in our world. And just the influence that sport has in our country. Again, I kind of mentioned up front that one of the reasons that I wanted to go into sport is I do feel like it's a great uniter of people. And it's something that, brings people joy in hard times, and brings people together when maybe they're not coming together. And I think, working with our NGBs and seeing how everyone operates differently, and there's so many niche areas in sport that I've just loved learning about, and learning about sports that maybe I didn't know about before, and just growing that admiration for the athletes who do that sport. It is a really cool feeling, and I do enjoy connecting with the athletes as well. Even though I didn't make my way, to the Olympic or Paralympic games, we do share that experience of being, an elite athlete at some point. And so being able to kind of share experiences and connect with the athletes is definitely really rewarding. Sorry, that's a hard question.
It sounds like it. No, it is kind of a hard question, I know. But it sounds like it is really fulfilling and really rewarding. But I want to kind of tie everything back. I want to go back to your experience as an athlete as we wrap up. What's an event? What's a time that you will never forget as an athlete that had a huge impact on you? And, as athletes, we obviously kind of lean on, our sports acumen and the sports memories that we have, even though we're sitting at a computer for most of the day now. But what's one of those times where it's something that you will just never forget and had a huge impact on you as an athlete?
Yeah, I could probably think of 20 examples, but I think it would be just the culmination of my senior year as an athlete. I struggled a lot with injuries, and towards the end, right before our conference championship of indoor track, which is in the winter season, I found out that I had 5 stress fractures in my foot. Most people struggle with one stress fracture, and it takes, a whole season to recover. And I only had one season left, which was outdoor track in the spring. And I, was on track to graduate, so couldn't redshirt, didn't want a redshirt, just wanted to run. And I told, my trainer, who looked at me and said, this is a 6+ month recovery. I said, well, let's try to make it 6 weeks because I want to race outdoor. And, I even if it's just one race, one time around the track, I want to finish my senior season. And somehow I was able to come back after 5 weeks of cross training, not running once. And, I was able to race 5 different times that season with no training on my feet, everything just cross training in the pool and on the bike, being in a boot and on crutches until basically race day, and, putting on the spikes and racing. And all 5 times I raced my PR, like exactly my PR, all 5 times, which is pretty challenging to do. It's pretty challenging to run the same time 5 times. But I think that really, one, kind of showed overcoming big obstacles and kind of letting that will to compete and that will to keep going, overcome, things that might get in the way. And then also kind of adding on to that, as I said, I think my whole senior season could be summed up in this question. But my very last race at Pac-12s at Stanford, I was not going to make the top 8. I was not going to score points for us at Pac-12s. However, in one of the early heats, I had a teammate in my heat who had the opportunity to score, as a top 8 runner. So in the prelim heat, to make sure that she advanced to the final, she had to get top 2, and there was, really quick runners in that group. So in order to give her the best chance to make the final, we devised a plan that I would go out as a rabbit and just run all the other girls super, super hard. It's, 800 meters, 2 laps. So she could then, know that that's what I'm doing and come from behind and make the final. And so it definitely, sacrificed my chance of, qualifying for the final or even PRing at that point. But I knew for the team, it would give us a chance to score more points, which is obviously what you want. So being able to, kind of put those two things together. One is, being able to overcome big obstacles and kind of let your self-determination overcome those hard challenges. And 2 is just being a team player at all times, being selfless, being able to put others first in betterment of the broader team. And so I think those 2 things, again, have really helped as I've transitioned into my professional life.
Cool. So we talked about the athletic side of the memories. Now, on the other side of things is obviously your career and the seat that you sit in now. What's either that first project that really solidified that you were doing the right thing, or just like a memorable time that you were working on something that really hit home and something that you kind of rest on today?
Yeah, I think my experiences, my first 2 months at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee, I joined about 2 months before the Tokyo Games in 2021. And obviously at that time, COVID was a huge concern and a huge factor of those games. And pretty immediately after starting there was a need for someone to step up and oversee all of our COVID communications from our chief medical officer, the Tokyo organizing committee, and other executives to our athletes. So essentially taking all the material that we get from those people and distill it down so athletes can understand, what is needed before they can enter the country and go, achieve their Olympic and Paralympic dream. And, at the core of it, doesn't sound like the most intriguing or exciting role. I learned so much about COVID, but I knew that was something that was needed and would directly impact and help our athletes. So I stepped up to that role and, was able to travel to Tokyo and experience the games. And I guess I did it so well that I was nominated to do it again for Beijing and do the same role for Beijing and make sure that our athletes were informed and aware of what they needed to do to be able to, again, achieve their dream. That's the most important thing that we can do is, make sure that we give every ounce of ourselves to make sure that our athletes can go to the games and achieve what they've been working so hard to do.
So I know, as a journalist for me, I had some starstruck moments, right? There's always times where even though you're trying to be as professional as possible, where you meet somebody that you've been watching as an athlete or somebody you grew up, kind of idolizing. Did you ever have one of those moments where you met somebody that you looked up to as an athlete in your current role?
Yeah, it was definitely, again, my first games in Tokyo, being in the athlete village, and I just happened to be waiting for the elevator when the full track and field team came into the village. And, I saw so many faces that I recognized that I've watched on TV for so many years and just admired and looked up to right there next to me. So yeah, like you mentioned, you try not to be too starstruck and try to play it cool. But it is still, really inspiring to be kind of in the same area and same space as them.
Yeah. And working in sports, that never goes away, by the way.
Nope.
Like it just doesn't, it's so funny to, be around so many people. And, I have friends that are Olympic medalists, silver and bronze medalists, and I've met so many gold medalists and,
Yep.
But it just never goes away. Every time you talk to these people and these high level athletes, you're just reminded of, the incredible feats that they were able to accomplish. And you just always try and, pick their brain and, pull stuff from them and, get any sort of pieces of advice that I think would be really, really good. So have you ever learned something from a coach or a teammate or somebody that you looked up to that, is a great piece of advice that you think that other athletes growing up should know?
Yeah. I think it wasn't necessarily directly from a coach or from, a teammate, but I think throughout my experience and, shooting for the stars and being able to kind of dream big, the one piece of advice that I have held on to is never let anyone tell you that you can't do something. Whether it's in your sport or, in your career or in school. I think that, that's what I held on to is, maybe it didn't seem like I was good enough to be a D1 runner, but I sure as heck was going to try to make it happen. And maybe it didn't seem like I was good enough to work at Nike or good enough to come at the, work at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. But I think that, overcoming that and really believing in yourself and believing in your abilities is kind of the biggest quality that you can have.
Yeah. Well, you've had a pretty amazing run already, in your career working at Nike, US and, Paralympic and Olympic Committee, which is incredible. Do you have anything else that you would like to leave us with as we wrap up today that you've learned throughout your career as an athlete or as a student or, anything throughout your career that you would like to leave us with?
Yeah, I think the last thing that I'd say is kind of going back to that transition of, being an athlete to being a professional and what that looks like out, finding your passion, what that looks like. What I would encourage, young athletes to do is think about why you love your sport. And, I think a lot of us will immediately go, oh, I like to compete, or I like to win, or, I like the competition aspect of it. But there's probably some other things that you really like about it too. Maybe you like your teammates and the camaraderie. Okay, well, let's think about, a career that could be, more people facing, where you're working with people every day and solving problems. Maybe you love the statistics or the numbers of your sport. You should probably think about a career that has to do with numbers, if that's something that you love about your sport. Or maybe you truly just love the competitive aspect. Sales, that's a really competitive, market and area, or real estate. So I think that's, as you make that transition, it's sometimes hard to think about what transferable skills that you might have that will add to your career. But I found that, starting with your passion and things that light your fire and things that make you excited to wake up every day is at least a good place to start, and can at least, point you in the right direction. And then try it out. And if it's not for you, then try something new. So yeah, I would say it's just find your passion in your sport. And then just circling back is just dream big. Don't let, years of experience define you. If you were an athlete for 4 years in college, you already have 4 years of work experience. I think that's something that we tend to forget as athletes, is that we are working, while we're in college at our sport. So, just don't let things scare you, dream big, and find your passion.
Awesome advice. I think everyone should definitely be doing that. Athlete or not, definitely rest on, dreaming big and making sure that you're going after absolutely everything that you ever want. Gwyn, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate you taking some time to share your experience and, talk about being an athlete and the things that you do every single day for the U.S. Paralympic and Olympic Committee. Thank you very much for joining me. It's been awesome, and very much so good luck to you in the future, no matter where your career takes you.
Thank you so much.